Greetings and welcome back to the Hungarian History Podcast. I am your host, Szántai Gábor. This is episode 26, and for a long time our path has followed the epic struggles of the Ottoman Wars. We will, without a doubt, return to that important era soon. But for now, our focus remains on a more recent and deeply personal chapter of our past. We are continuing with our special sub-series Voices of 56, and this is part 5. In these episodes, I have the profound privilege of speaking directly with the heroes of the Hungarian freedom fight and their children, grandchildren, preserving their testimonies for future generations. Our previous episode took us a step back, and we could place these personal stories into a wider context, with a comprehensive summary of the last 170 years of Hungarian emigration. The response to that overview was tremendous, and it confirmed a feeling I have had for a long time that these stories are not just important, they are essential, and that this mission of preservation must continue. Which brings us to today and to the future. Let me greet our guests now. So, dear Gabby, where are you from?
I was born in Budapest in 1950, so I was six and a half when the revolution began.
I see. So you don't remember many things?
I do remember a lot.
Okay. Yes.
I was a very precocious child. I was really in an adult group. I didn't have brothers or sisters. And I lived with my mother and father, my grandmother, and my uncle. So I was very much, I think in some ways, more grown up than my age would suggest.
I see. And tell me, Gaby, and did your parents tell you the stories as well?
I confirmed the stories because I had certain memories of the revolution. And when I asked my parents if these were true, they were confirmed definitely.
This is very exciting. Please tell us more about these things. But first of all, let me ask you, where are you located?
So our right now, you
Yes.
mean? Yes, I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Oh, it's a beautiful place. I've been there once. Yes.
It is lovely. I've lived here for ever since, well, not quite since we came to Canada, but for a long time now.
Okay.
So should I start with my Hungarian experience?
Please.
So as I said, I was a very precocious child. My mother was home with me. She taught me many things, and so I was very aware of what was going on. And our apartment, which is still part of my family, was on Falknisha Street, which is almost right across a kitty corner to the Parliament buildings. So there was a lot of action there. I remember looking out the back window, and my mother told me, "Oh, don't go there," because there were tanks outside my back window. And so I remember hearing the fighting and being terrified. And I would hide under my duvet with my favorite teddy bear called Revitsky Péter.
Wow.
And I have no idea why I called this teddy bear. Revitsky was my mother's maiden name, but Péter, there's no Peter in our family. But that was my security blanket. And what I saw through that time was that my mother and I would, before the revolution, would go out every single day. There was a beautiful park, and we would go on little adventures. We would go visit my father at work. He worked at the North Railway Station at the Nyugati. He was the manager there.
Yes.
And so I had a very full and very rich life as a child. As I said, I was listened to because I was surrounded by adults. So I heard everything that was kind of going on. And I remember looking at my mother's face when my father would at the beginning still go into work to open up so that there would be food supplies distributed. And the worry and the anxiety of what was going on. And then all of a sudden, I remember my father not going to work anymore.
What was his name?
And my father's name was Gyula.
Gyula, yes. And your mom?
Marton Gyula. My father's name was Marton Gyula, and my mother was Ravitsky Marta.
Marta and Gyula, I see. Yes, thank you.
And at one point, my father and mother, and now this is a story they told me, I didn't, of course, know at that time, was that a colleague of my father's, who was the night manager there, had been detained. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, frightened my mother very, very much. Now, with the caveat that my parents were not members of the Communist Party. So this made it even more tricky for them. And they were trying to figure out how to get out at one point. And my uncle, who lived with us, he was a member of the Communist Party. He was an economist and worked in some department for the government. And Christmas Eve, so December 24th, in the middle of the night, a car came, picked us up. What I remember is my mother dressing me in so many clothes that I was almost stuffed, and picking us up and taking us. They got through all the checkpoints, don't ask me how, but we got down to Fertő Szent Miklós, where my father's family was from.
Yes.
And from there, we had somebody take us to the border and actually walk us across. And I remember that distinctly because I was holding on to my teddy bear, and I had a tiny little bag or suitcase that I was helping carry, and my mother was carrying the one suitcase because my father had a severe sinus infection and was very, very ill as we crossed this border. And I remember just going into a gully and going on to the other side. And
yes.
And this man who accompanied us said, "You are now in Austria. You are safe." And my parents taking out, not my father because he wasn't feeling well, but my mother and this gentleman or this farmer, whoever he was, take out a cigarette and light a cigarette and smoked a cigarette together. And then he directed us to some place ahead there where refugees were welcomed. And my next memory is that as soon as we arrived, a doctor was called for my dad because he was very ill, and somebody giving me a dollhouse.
Oh no,
because it was Christmas.
That's beautiful.
Because it was Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember a doll, but I remember this dollhouse. And from there, we were actually taken by bus, and I have a picture of us with tags on, my mother, my father, and I. And we ended up in St. Pölten in Austria.
Yes.
In an army barracks there. And my parents had requested to go to the U.S. because we had relatives in the U.S., and they guaranteed us, they were in the restaurant business, work and everything, but for some reason we were not able to get a visa. And so we stayed in the army barracks, or that camp for refugees, until the end of July. at which point my parents decided that I couldn't miss another year of school. And we also had relatives in Canada, and so they decided that we would come to Canada.
It's even better place.
Yes. Well, that's an interesting story. And then I remember us crossing on this boat, this humongous, it was an Italian boat, and I was terribly seasick. And as my mother told me, this Italian seaman took pity on me because he had children and sort of associated me with his children. And he took me up to the upper decks where we were not allowed to go so that I could get more fresh air. And he would always bring me some bread because he kept telling me to eat bread so I wouldn't be so sick. And we arrived in Canada. I believe it was Halifax that we actually arrived. And from there we took the train to London, Ontario. And from London, Ontario, we took a bus and ended up in Simcoe, in the Simcoe area, where we had relatives. They all owned tobacco farms at that point. And one of my mother's sister's daughter took us in. And in fact, by the time that we arrived there, my mother's brother's family and her sister's family were also on that farm. And so we arrived, and the next day my parents went to work in the tobacco fields.
Yes.
And that was, my parents that were both white-collar workers. My mother had worked in a bank all her life. And my father ran, the utascialato, so they had never lived on a farm. But they managed, and the following year we became sharecroppers on her sister's farm.
Good.
And yeah, what I remember though is that in that September when we first arrived of going to school, and I was already 7 years old, so I was older than the other kids. I remember being placed at the back of the classroom, not knowing a single word of English. And
must have
being
been
looked
very
at.
hard for you to.
Very hard, and kids making fun of you, right? And I also had earrings, right? Because kids in Canada at that point didn't wear earrings, so that was like something very strange to them. But I was always quite smart, and so within half a year I was speaking English. And I was always very good in math and things like that. So school became fairly easy for me as soon as the language was acquired. And in fact, once we became sharecroppers, I became the translator for my parents.
I thought so. Children are better than their parents always.
Yeah. So, I translated everything. I bought, insurance, hail insurance, for example. I had to do the translating for everything, for the selling of tobacco, etc. But so we lived there for 6 years. And then my parents decided that, this was not for them. And they decided to give up being sharecroppers. They had saved enough money so that we moved to London, Ontario, which is a city of about 300,000 people. And they were able to buy a house there. And my father went to work. The only job he could find was in a steel factory. And he became a welder, which was a good paying job at that point. And I finished high school in London, Ontario. And then I went to the university there. And I wanted to desperately become a doctor. I was always interested in medicine and a good student, but my father, just as I was finished or at the university where I would apply to become a doctor, my father again became very ill. We weren't sure that he was going to live or not live, and then I had to think about supporting myself and my mother. So I switched gear and went to teachers college. And because that was just another year instead of another 5-6 years of study. And after I finished teachers college, I moved to Toronto, got a job here, and I got married that same year. And I married a Hungarian gentleman who was from Nagyvárad.
Wow! So you could speak Hungarian among each other.
I speak perfect Hungarian. I read and write as well. So I mean, my Hungarian apparently is very good according to everybody that I speak to. So my husband and I then, I became, as I said, I was a teacher. My husband was an architect. And we had 2 children.
Yes.
Who are now in their 40s. And I have now 3 beautiful grandchildren as well. Unfortunately, my husband passed away 3 years ago, very suddenly.
Oh, I'm
so
sorry
I am
to
now.
hear that. I'm really sorry.
So
to
I'm
hear
now.
that. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm now a widow, but I'm very, very fortunate. I have everything that I need. I had an amazing 35-year career in education. I became a principal. And retired and still worked until COVID hit, off and on, just going in. So I've had a very rich life. There have been lots of obstacles, but my life has also been very, 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 very good. And I'm
very happy to hear that, Gaby. And tell me, and what does it mean to you, this 1956? What is the message?
The message for me is resilience.
Resilience, yes.
Resilience. Because my father, for example, he was also in the war, and he was in Siberia for 3 years. My mother was a young girl who lost her fiancé in the war. So my parents were able to build a life together and be happy and enjoy every moment. When they came to Canada, as I said, they were no longer white-collar workers.
They had to start everything from the scratch. Yes.
From everything from the beginning. And yet they were always positive. They were always happy. They enjoyed their life in the moments of happiness.
So you could pass it down to your children and grandchildren, couldn't you?
Exactly. And the other major thing that I think my parents really instilled in me was that I must go to school.
Oh yes, education is absolutely important.
Because my mother and father said that can never be taken away from you.
Oh yes, that's right, and that's why I am running this podcast. You see, for those who can speak Hungarian, but for their sake, these stories should be preserved. Our guest speaker is now Anne. Anne, where are you from?
So I'm living now in Herefordshire in the United Kingdom, right on the border with Wales, in the countryside.
Yes, that's a nice place. It must be a very nice place.
Yeah, very beautiful place.
And did your father or mother come over from Hungary?
Both of them, yeah. They came over separately under very separate circumstances, and they met here in England. But they were both from Budapest.
It's very romantic. Can you tell me their story?
Yeah. So my father was a Jew, a Hungarian Jew. He was born in 1931. So when he was 6 years old, they converted to Catholicism just to try to survive the Nazis, but it didn't make any difference. He was still very much a Jew living in under Nazi, under the Nazis with the yellow star.
Oh, yes.
He was very lucky in the fact that they were put in the Jewish ghettos, but there was Raoul Wallenberg who delayed the clearing of the Budapest Jews, and it was this delay basically that saved his life. You probably know this story very well.
Yes, it's a very famous story.
Yeah. So he was one of the people really who was saved by Wallenberg. And after, when the Russians came, then he was very intellectual. He was very much in the intellectual kind of family, and he was very interested in the arts as well as the sciences. But he wanted to be a stage director, but was encouraged to do engineering. But then under Stalin, I think they said because his father was had connections with the West, he was a dodgy character, and so they made him do civil engineering, which he really didn't want to do, but he did this well. And then after he graduated, he was working for an engineering company, I think Tunsram, I think was the name.
Tunsram, and what was your father's name, by the way?
My father's name is Peter Zollman.
Peter, yeah. So Peter started to work for the Tunsram. I see.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was involved with them. He was working with them and very much involved with the workers' union with them, and was quite sort of communist in his beliefs at that time. But when the uprising started, he was very much part of that and actively involved in that. I'm not too sure in what capacity. I think it was he was collecting money and organising within the company the sort of resistance to the Russians, and was very much involved in a way that when it was overthrown, he knew he wouldn't be safe, and so that was his reason. He knew he had to leave.
And you see, other people say that this uprising was a Nazi uprising. So how nonsense it is, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, nothing to do with that. No, this was much later, yeah, after the Nazis had gone, yeah.
Yes, and what happened after the dark days? So the Russians came in, I guess, and he had to leave.
Yeah, he was involved. He was on the streets, as they took over the radio and all of this. He was very much involved, and he was marching in the streets with all the revolutionaries and the protesters. So he was very much involved with that. And then when I think he waited till the very last minute when I think he was so hopeful at the beginning that they would win, and took him I think he clung on to hope to the very bitter end. But when it was very obvious that the Russians were going to overthrow it all, he knew he had to leave at that point. Yeah.
And how did he leave?
He left. He said it was actually not that traumatic. He went on the train. He agreed it with his family. He took his younger brother, who was 10 years younger than himself, so he was only 15. My father was 25, I think, at the time. And he took his younger brother. He left his parents behind, but they knew he was going. And they took a train to the border, and then were met by students on the other side in Austria who had arranged coaches. And I think the story he told was it was the Sheffield University students had arranged a coach, and they had accommodation ready for the refugees in Sheffield, but because my father was such a Budapest person and he couldn't imagine not living in the capital city, he jumped ship in London. When they arrived in London, he took himself off the coach and didn't go back and tried to stay there. So he stayed in London then after that.
Good decision.
It was a decision to move to Britain, I think, as well. To stay in Britain was a big decision for him, but it was well thought out, and I think he really believed he was coming to a classless society and a society where foreigners were welcomed, and so I think that those what guided his decisions. But despite that, he feels he made a very good choice, and things went very well for him here.
And what did he do in the first time?
He was very lucky. He found employment quickly, and then very shortly after he arrived, he got his dream job of getting a PhD under Professor Gabor, the Nobel Prize winner. So he worked with him for a long time doing his PhD, and so he was a mentor, and he was such a great man and they shared the love of literature and art, as well as doing very pioneering physics work. And my father then went, so this was very formative time for him, and I think he absolutely loved that time working with Dennis Gabor. And
yes, Dennis Gabor, yes. And then how did he meet your mother?
So this was later. It was through a mutual friend. Yeah, I should go on to say that my father then set up. He worked in physics, and he was basically an inventor, really. Worked for several companies, but then set up his own company, which won 3 Queen's Awards and did a lot of international trade and created a lot of employment, and grew until 1970. When did he sell it? 1994, I think he sold it, because it got so big he didn't want to. He knew it was going in a direction. He kept it very open and trusting within all the workers. It was a very open. That was the aim of his company. So it was very successful, but also a very sort of, what's the word, grassrootsy kind of place where everybody was involved and everything was open about it. And he knew it couldn't stay like that as it got older. They invented the tunnel guidance machine that dug the channel tunnel, and also the CERN Hadron Collider, the big particle accelerator at CERN. So they used his instrument to do that. So he invented all of that. But when he sold the company,
it's fantastic.
Yeah. He's quite well known. And then his big thing, when he retired, then he went back to his real love of literature and poetry, and he spent all his final years doing a lot of poetry translation of all the famous Hungarian poets, and became often a translator of choice for the contemporary poets. What's his name? Kanyadi. He worked with him a lot, yeah. And but he's also published a lot of. He translated Bluebeard's Castle and Csongor Tünde and other sort of operatic works. He did the libretto for as well.
So he actually was attracted to the Hungarian culture and heritage very much, seemingly.
Yes, very much. It was very important to him all his life, and I think he may have gone down that road, not the scientific road, if he had been free at that time. But obviously he was a very brilliant man. He became quite well known. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and the Bards of Wales also was translated by him.
Wow. That's very, very nice work. So really congratulations. And has he ever visited back to Hungary?
Yeah, he loved Hungary. I mean, I do remember the very first time we went was still before 89. We went when I was very young, and then he was told he wasn't allowed to go back, and they wouldn't tell us why. and even family members in Hungary couldn't find out why. And then suddenly this was lifted towards the end. It must have been maybe 87, something like this. And it's the first time I saw fear on his face was when he was crossing the border then. But that was the first time we were allowed back as a family then for many years. And then after the Iron Curtain came down, he went many times because he loved Hungary so much. And he went back as a guest speaker at the universities with his translations a lot. So he lectured in the universities on translation and stuff as well as they performed many of his works in Hungary as well, at the Merlin Theatre, which was the international theatre, and then at the I can't remember the name of it, the big one on the Duna that's like a bit like a whale shape they put on his the Bards of Wales was performed there. The first performance. Sorry?
The building. You mean was it the ELTE University?
No. It's like a concert hall.
A concert hall. Yes.
Yeah, a big one. The big new glass one on the Danube.
Yeah, it was not the Balna, the whale. No.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, that one.
Yes, it could have been.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
That's
yes, it was
beautiful.
Definitely
So
that one.
really, it's an outstanding story, and I'm very happy that you could tell his story here in this podcast, because many people don't speak Hungarian language, just English, and they about 8 million people.
Yeah, since he died, I'm learning Hungarian, but it's still very not as good as your English by any chance.
It is
so I'm trying to learn it. Yeah.
So, and when did your father pass away?
He'd passed away 2013.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, 12 years ago. Yeah.
And what is the message of your father's life and activity in 1956 to you, Anne?
He didn't speak much about it until much later. When they came here, he really wanted us to fit in and be brought up as English as possible. And so they never spoke Hungarian at home and didn't really celebrate much of Hungarian culture at home. We were really brought up very English, and it wasn't till later I even realised that we weren't English, if you know. But then I became much more interested, not really till I was probably about 40, I think, when in late 30s, early 40s, I became much more interested and would ask him a lot more. And he was doing his translating by then, and he was always happy to talk about it. But he didn't dwell too much on his experiences in the war or during the uprising. He would talk about it, but not. It was always with asking. He wouldn't do it on his own, really.
Yeah, but it had an impact on his life, because it was
very much, yeah.
a great change. It made him cross the channel and to settle down in England. So out of this and us.
So her family came from Esztergom, her older family, but they moved to Budapest before she was born. And she was born into kind of quite a sort of middle class Catholic family. She has a very big family. They seem to run quite wild. So she was a linguist. She loved learning languages, and she went to the university, but doing languages, French and Latin, I think. And then she didn't finish because she got a job at the British Council and loved the work there so much that she was working there. And I think she was then this was closed down and she had to get other work as the communists came. Her experiences under the war were very different, and they were just kind of surviving, really, escaping bombings and stuff. But she wasn't obviously in the Jewish community at all, so it was just the survival and trying to find a safe place when all the bombings were happening.
Sure.
Her father's brother owned a factory, and they sheltered there during the wars quite a lot. But because of that, when the Russians came, they were worried that her father would be a kind of bourgeoisie and would be punished and would have they did have the house taken. They had a lovely 3-story villa in Buda, and they were left with only 2 rooms. The Russians took the rest of it, but they thought that even these would be taken because of his background. So they encouraged the 2 daughters, my mother and her sister, to marry their boyfriends quickly so they could get out of his kind of household, so they also wouldn't be punished. So she had a kind of quick marriage, and was the British embassy was closed down. She was working for a secretary for somewhere else. I can't quite remember the name of it, but anyway, it was at this place where somebody then told it. This was December now, after the uprising. She wasn't particularly involved with the uprising, I don't think, but was feeling very much the Russian oppression and her inability to work how she wanted, and the lack of culture and the inward looking. And so she, somebody from her work was organised in a group to escape, and she went with them. She didn't even tell her parents she was leaving, because it was like literally the next night. She just had to pack a bag and go. And they walked over the border. They walked across the fields. They were guided by a peasant who was on the side, and he took them safely across to the border, where there were camps in Austria. And because she had very good languages, she could speak English as well, she was very much in demand at this camp and was helping everybody. And she was taken then to Vienna, and had a contact where she thought she could stay, but they were full, so they gave her another name, and she stayed with a family just outside Vienna. And from there she was offered she went then to the British embassy there, and they said she would get work in England at the British embassy there, because she had worked for the British already.
Very, very
and
lucky.
So she went to London and ended up working there.
Excellent.
And was put up by a very kind what's the word? A philanthropist who helped the Hungarian refugees and put her up in a hotel for a while she found her own digs. So that was her story. And then they met through a mutual friend in England, my parents.
Well, they matched each other perfectly, I guess, in culture and in everything, language. So you are very fortunate having such fantastic parents. And do you have a brother or sister?
I have a sister, yes.
You have a sister. Okay. Yeah. Well, this part of the story was very important too, and now people can see how important it is to keep the culture. And well, I just want to repeat myself that I wish you lots of success.
Thank you very much. And thank you for doing this podcast and keeping the history alive.
And so we conclude another chapter in our Voices of 56 areas. My sincerest thanks to my guests for sharing their powerful story and their family's legacy with us. The overwhelming attention our last episode received has solidified my resolve. This project cannot and will not end with the stories of 1956. The tapestry of the Hungarian diaspora is woven with threads from many different eras, from those who sought a new life in the New World decades before the Revolution, to those who left in its long and difficult aftermath. Therefore, this is an open invitation. If your ancestors emigrated from Hungary at any point in history, and you have a story you believe should be preserved and heard, I urge you to contact me. Let us ensure these personal histories are not lost to time. Help me in this mission. Spread the word about this podcast, share these episodes, and let's build this living archive together. Until next time, remain curious. I am Szántai Gábor. Thank you for listening. Goodbye. Sziasztok. A viszonthallásra.